Did you watch YouTube's Dancing for the Devil about 7M and Robert Shinn's church, Shekinah Church, and the cult-like experience that members had? Did you have some questions about PTSD and post-traumatic parenting about that documentary? If you're a post-traumatic parent and that documentary was triggering, if you want to unpack some psychological truths about that episode, click subscribe below so you never miss another episode, because that's the kind of thing we talk about. Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Koslowitz, YouTube's post-traumatic parenting expert. A lot of times post-traumatic parents will message me about documentaries, shows, reality TV, things that they've seen that confuse them or that make them think of their own PTSD and their own history and wanting to explore that. So let's understand what this documentary was and why so many post-traumatic parents are talking about it. So the documentary follows basically two families that got involved in the church. There were really three, but two that I'm going to talk about. There were the Wilkie sisters and there were the Lee sisters, who got involved in this Shekinah church run by Pastor Robert Shinn. Now, I am going to say that I am not a lawyer, not involved in this case, have no knowledge of any of the people. All I know is what I saw and what I read. So I'm going to say cult-like because it is not my job. I'm not the prosecutor. I can't say whether or not this was a cult. I'm going to talk about some red flags, and I'm going to talk about religious trauma. So there was a Shekinah church that these young dancers got involved in that was specifically targeting, like recruiting, these young dancers who were moving to LA, who were starting to make names for themselves on TikTok and even on TV, who were on some pretty mainstream shows, like World of Dance. And these dancers were joining this Shekinah church that was also a management company. So it was kind of both. Now, here's the thing. One of the things you learn in when you become a psychologist or when you learn any jurisprudence, business management, business practices, is the concept of dual relationships and fiduciary relationships. So I want to talk about the red flags first, and then I want to talk about the relationships and what happened there. So a big red flag is when you have two relationships with somebody, which one are you? Meaning, are you my pastor or are you the guy who tells me how to invest my money? Because are you the guy who tells me which videos to shoot for TikTok to which music and takes a cut of, you know, brand deals? Like, what are you right now? Because you can't really be both. That's called a dual relationship. So, for example, if you're a doctor and you developed a new drug, you think, this is a great drug. This drug is the best drug ever to, like, I don't know, cure male pattern baldness, right? And you think you're going to make $1 million on this drug. Now you have people coming in and you're prescribing them this drug. Now you have a financial incentive to prescribe them this drug because you made money on the doctor visit and you're making money on the drug that you are part of selling because it's your drug that you're trying to sell. Now, let's say people are starting to like report side effects. Maybe there's some worrisome, you know, health implications of this drug. You have every incentive to like not pay those things so much attention. Meaning, if you're a regular doctor and you've never developed a drug and you have 17 different drugs that you can prescribe for male pattern baldness, and one of them has more side effects than the others, you're going to be like, oh yeah, well, I'm not prescribing that one. I'm going to prescribe this one. When you have a financial stake in one of them, you're much more likely to be like, yeah, that side effect, whatever, you know, who needs like urinary continence anyway? It's fine. You can just wear Depends, right? Like, why? Because it's very easy to delude ourselves when the financial motivations are in one direction. Mark Twain has this wonderful line, tell me where a man gets his cornbread and I'll tell you what his opinions are, right? Because obviously your opinions are very swayed by economic imperatives. That just makes sense. So you're not allowed to have dual relationships right? I am not allowed to, if I would be a psychiatrist, I would not be allowed to sell a drug that I developed, right? I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm a psychologist, but same idea. You're not allowed to do those things because of that dual relationship. Because when you come into a doctor, the fiduciary aspect of the relationship, which means I pay you money for your opinion. So the fiduciary nature of that relationship means that I want you to have my best interests at heart. So I want you to tell me, there's 16 drugs I could take. Which one do you think is the absolute best drug for me? So that's a dual relationship. So when a church is also your management company, that's a dual relationship, because as your church, I think you should tithe 90% of what you just earned from that video to me. And as your management company, I'm going to take the other 10% because I'm your management company. So I have to take 10% of your earnings, right? That's a problem. Those relationships get very fuzzy. The reason this is being called cult-like is because it seemed like as members were joining this cult, it seemed like there was a lot of, if someone's not in this cult, we're going to distance them. We're not going to talk to them. We're going to push them aside. We're going to push them out of our life. Robert Shin reportedly said, you have to die to yourself and die to your family. And that will somehow save them. Like, you're doing it for their sake. If you want them to have, I don't know, salvation or something, then you're going to die to your family. And this is like, you're doing it in service of them. It's a sacrifice you're making for them. That is, again, that sounds like a cult. Not an expert in cults, but that sounds cult-like. I think for most people, that sounds cult-like. The more the church was becoming the center of these young dancers' lives, the churches where they're dancing, the churches where they have their friends, the churches even where they're renting their apartment from, they're getting all of their information from, they're even getting their brand deals from, the less they have any contact with the outside world. So it becomes a very siege mentality, us versus everybody else in the world, which can feel very seductive when you're part of the chosen few, right? It feels like, wow, I'm part of this group. We know the truth. The rest of the world doesn't get it. I've cut off from family members who, don't get it. And I'm part of this, mission. And that feels great, especially for young adults who are maybe living away from family, who are, for the first time living in the adult world and trying to make it in a very competitive world where your shelf life is really short. So it's very easy to see how and why these young dancers would be so easy sort of to prey on and to get into a cult like that, because they're looking for meaning in their life, right? Dancing, especially being on TikTok especially, can be very superficial. It's all about how you look and how cute you are and how on trend you are. And humans seek out meaning. We like to have meaning and purpose in our lives. So if this is going to be a church, which people very often have positive associations, like when I went to church as a child and it's a safe place, and this is where I'll find meaning and community and like-minded individuals, it's easy to see how they could be preyed upon. Now I want to talk for a minute about the Lee sisters, because the Lee sisters in some way make me think of a lot of post-traumatic parents. The Lee sisters were sisters who basically raised each other because their mom was an alcoholic, their dad was not present, so they had this incredibly strong bond. When they joined 7M, one of the sisters became really invested in it and basically cut off, and the other sister got out. The other sister, the one who got out, did eventually have a baby, move on with her life, being cut off with her sister. There was this extremely telling scene about post-traumatic parenting where the sisters were talking, and one sister was saying, how could you miss your niece's birthday? Like, my daughter is only going to turn 4 once. How could you just not show up? And her sister said, you're looking through the lens. This made me think of post-traumatic parenting so much. I want every post-traumatic parent listening to this to think for a second, if you've had this conversation with somebody, or if you've needed to have this conversation and you haven't, but this is exactly what you needed to say. She said, you're looking at this through the lens of like a normal person, and like a normal sister should show up at her only niece's 4-year-old birthday party, because that's what normal people do. Like, how do you miss your 4-year-old niece's birthday party? Like, you just show up for an afternoon, like not that hard. I'm not a normal person. I am broken and dead on the inside. I invested my life in this church and this management company, this career that didn't happen, this management company that stole everything from me, this career in the church where she was like a financial officer there and she was working, this social life, these friends, this community, a place where I was somebody. I invested all of that. And now I'm waking up and I'm not going to be having any babies. I'm not, I lost so many years of my life. I am so broken. And now you just want me to be a normal person and show up at a birthday party? Right? When I heard that exchange, it made me think of so many times in my life before I really knew what PTSD was and before I really knew that I had PTSD or that I was a post-traumatic parent, where someone would tell me something that like I had let them down for or something that they expected. Even let's say I tend to like cram a lot into my life and sometimes I'll come late to something. There's a party and it started at 7 and I'll show up at 8 and someone will be like, well, how could you be late? What's so hard about just showing up to a party on time? Yeah, for a normal person. And it's still hard because like kids and getting out on time, at least in my life, not compatible. I don't have a great sense of time because of PTSD. But on top of that, like, you know how you get everybody ready for the party, or maybe this is just me, get everybody ready for the party. You're like walking out the door and then the baby has a diaper. And while you're changing the baby's diaper, the 3-year-old spills ice cream down their front. Maybe it's just me, but there went an hour and now you are an hour late. And I remember having that thought like, yeah, but me also with my PTSD, I sometimes lose time. I hyper-focus, especially when I'm working. I can focus and dissociate. I can lose a sense of time, and my time sense is just not great because of my PTSD. And probably also neurologically, I've never been amazing with time. So yeah, for a regular person who doesn't have PTSD, getting to a party at 7 p.m., I guess is a reasonable expectation. I still think if you have multiple children, not a reasonable expectation, but that's just me. But on top of that, if you have PTSD, then yeah, it's going to take an extra hour, right? If you have PTSD and like this woman said, I'm broken inside. So to organize myself on a day that I'm really sad or having flashbacks or whatever it was that happened that day, to get to a 4-year-old's birthday party feels like a mountain too high to climb. Yeah, that's what PTSD feels like. One sister got out. One sister, it took her many, many, many years to get out. That experience, 7M, Shekinah Church, the whole experience, like I said, cult-like, took over her life, stole years from her. That's a very, very big loss to mourn. So it makes so much sense. But that scene in the documentary just made me think of, yes, post-traumatic people everywhere. You're expecting me to be a normal person, to act like a normal person, to have normal person reactions. But I'm not the normal person. It's almost like I remember in high school thinking this about a certain teacher, like right after my father died, I had a certain teacher who was like, I don't believe in like excuses. Okay, like you lost your father, so I'll give you a little extra time, but I expect the paper in the day that it's due. I'll give you like an extra week due date or whatever, grace period. And I remember thinking like, as this teacher's like giving, and I had other teachers who didn't even say that. They were just like, your chemistry test is in 2 weeks. Like there was no acknowledgement that like my life just fell apart. And I remember thinking that like, it's almost like everybody else we all have to climb, 10 flights of stairs and then we get to someplace. And everybody else is climbing 10 flights of stairs and I'm arriving at the 10th floor and everyone's like, why are you so out of breath? Like, oh my gosh, with 10 flights of stairs, it's not that big a deal. Except I was in the 00 sub basement and I had to climb up from all the sub basement levels to get to the first floor to climb the 10 steps, to climb the 10 steps that everybody else was climbing. So yeah, everyone else only climbed 10 steps. I climbed like a whole bunch of flights of stairs to get to the 10 steps. But everyone's looking at me like, oh my gosh, wow, why was it so hard for you to get the chemistry, project in on time? It's just the chemistry project. It's not that hard. Yeah, but I had to climb up from the sub basement. You came from the ground floor. There's a difference. You might have even come from the 2nd floor or the 5th floor. There's a difference. But that scene really hit me hard. Yeah, you're thinking of me as a normal person, and it's a reasonable expectation for normal people, not a normal person. If you're a post-traumatic parent, if that resonates with you, if this is something you've been thinking about, hi, welcome. We get it. We're post-traumatic parents too. Click subscribe below so you never miss another episode. If you want to hang out where post-traumatic parenting community hangs out, check out the post-traumatic parenting community on Instagram. It's at Dr. Kozlowitz Psychology. You can also check out the Post-Traumatic Parenting Podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, if you want to hear episodes with experts talking about post-traumatic parenting. And of course, keep your eyes peeled for the Post-Traumatic Parenting book, which is coming out in 2025. I cannot wait to hear what all of you think of it. If you have a friend who would benefit from having a conversation about how trauma and parenting intersect, please send that friend this video, click subscribe, let people know, comment below so that we can have a conversation. Let me know if there are other videos you want to hear about. There are other topics in post-traumatic parenting that you're confused about, so that we can make sure that everybody's questions get answered. Till next time.